At the outset of the debate, I would like to wholeheartedly congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Maidstone, on her promotion to become a minister. She, of course, followed my great friend Anne Widdicombe as the Member of Parliament for Maidstone, and I'm absolutely delighted that my honourable friend has been made a minister, and I have every confidence that when it comes to the reply, she will satisfy all my very reasonable demands. Now, I fully understand, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the subject that I'm raising this evening is not the most cheerful subject. Death is something that is a taboo to talk about. But none of us are immortal, I think, and the one thing that is certain is that we are all going to die. Not yet. And according to the Dying Matters Coalition, 2/3 of us are uncomfortable talking about dying and death. Thinking about what happens to us after we are gone is likely to be of huge significance, however, not just from a personal perspective, but from the loved ones that we leave behind. This will often be centred on funeral arrangements, and I think the funeral arrangements provide the very last chance to leave a mark on the world that we have just left. I personally, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I've been to more funerals than I've probably had meals, I see funerals, and I've never been to a truly happy funeral, but I like to see them, if the person's lived a reasonable length of time, as a celebration of their life. A notion gained from my time on the all-party parliamentary group for funerals and bereavements. The two most recent funerals I've been to are that of my good friend who was the Member of Parliament for Hyndburn from 1983 to 1992, Ken Hargreaves, and we are having a memorial service in the crypt on the 3rd Wednesday in October, and I do think the date of the funeral, of the memorial service, is in the crypt. That was a very, very moving ceremony in Hyndburn, and I was honoured to give the eulogy. And then I recently went to the funeral of my first election agent. She was my agent in the late 60s, Joan Short, and that was at the City of London crematorium. I should add, Madam Deputy Speaker, but this isn't advertising for a job. A number of constituents have asked me to preside over the funerals of their loved ones. This has happened when their loved one doesn't have any particular faith. And although I can't say I've entirely enjoyed presiding, if that's what the departed constituent has wanted me to do, that is what I would do. Now, unless there is a member who's died and has resurrected, I don't think any of us can really talk about what it feels like to be dead. Whether we're someplace and we're looking down at our funeral service and we say to one another, my goodness, I can't believe that hypocrite has turned up at my funeral or not, I don't know. I've no doubt at all that my own funeral, there will be one or two people who will go to the altar just to check that the coffin lid has been screwed tightly. But that aside, I do think a funeral itself is a very, very important event. And I've been to funerals where there's been no one at all, and I've been to funerals when there's so many people there, everyone standing outside the church. Now, despite the importance of funerals, apparently only 1/3 of us have discussed what type of funeral we would like. I want to say publicly, I will not be cremated, I intend to be buried. So I hope there's no one vengeful who disregards my wishes and cremates me rather than buried me. And that actually is going to be the thrust of my speech. And I actually believe that not wanting to talk about death leads to an unwillingness to address the issues and problems that surround it. There are many, many issues surrounding this subject. Foremost among them is what happens to our body once we die. And I think we do owe it to our loved ones to ensure that death is as smooth and as pain-free as possible, while still providing a dignified chance for remembrance. Cremation, which I know is very, very popular, is overwhelmingly the choice of the majority of people in the United Kingdom. It's about 70%, and that is in fact the highest cremation rate apparently in the world. In some respects it is understandable because we are a tiny little country and we lack space. The arguments are that it's efficient, hygienic, cheap and leaves behind no site that needs to be maintained, as happens with burial sites. Certainly.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, and I did speak to him before in regards to this. There's two things in life we're sure of: it's death and taxes. Those are the things that we have to deal with, whether we like it or whether we don't. The honourable member has mentioned about the cremation is the method where more people in the United Kingdom use that, but he also had mentioned that he would like to be buried. Is he aware of the new system that enables perhaps where at present there's maybe only 3 people allowed in a grave to be buried, they can actually be 6 people from a family buried? And is he aware of that system? Because that means that families can then be together in the circumstances of their death, and that would probably be what a lot of families would like to have. And it also takes care, also takes care of the issue of space as well.
Well, if I say to the honourable member, who is my friend, I certainly am aware of that, and I will be touching upon that suggestion briefly in my speech. But I know that in Northern Ireland apparently it does work extremely well. So I want to question whether the popularity of cremations is actually born out of choice or necessity. Because I've already said I certainly don't want to be cremated. But some groups' religious doctrine completely rules out cremation. For instance, Jewish people, Muslims, and until recently my own faith, the Catholics, disapprove of cremation, whilst modern-day environmentalists object to the environmental impact of cremation and prefer natural or green burials. And the first time I was invited to attend a natural burial, I thought, my goodness, putting someone in a cardboard box, is it going to collapse? In fact, it was done with great dignity, and that is the choice for a number of environmentalists. But I wonder, is the high cremation rate, I say this to my honourable friend the Minister, explained by people genuinely wanting to be cremated, or is it the lack of choice when it comes to burial and the absence of locally accessible, well-managed cemeteries with available burial space? I don't think the answer is a simple one, but I would like to use this debate to explore the possibility that some people are forced to be cremated due to lack of choice about burials. And I would like to entertain the idea that this problem is going to get worse. We should face up to it, and I think this Parliament should give a lead. I am aware that responsibility for burials is a very complex field, involving local and parochial authorities. I also understand that at present there is no statutory requirement, as my honourable friend the Minister knows, to make available a place for burial. But this does not change the fact that we need to try and approach the issue of burial space in a holistic fashion. Burial space is a problem that has plagued this country since indeed Victorian times. And despite the issue resurfacing again and again, I don't think it's been adequately addressed. The longer we leave this issue, the more serious it is going to become. And it's particularly, and I'm pleased to see the honourable member for Ealing in his place as well, it's a particular problem in London. In August 1997, the London Planning Advisory Committee published their report, Planning for Burial Space in London. This outlined that inner London boroughs were then estimated to have only 7 years burial capacity remaining, whilst for outer London boroughs it was up to 18 years. A more recent report in 2011 suggested that inner boroughs such as Lambeth, Tower Hamlets, Kensington and Chelsea had virtually no burial space remaining, while some outer London boroughs such as Croydon and Haringey, the situation was deemed to be critical.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way and for securing this debate. He will know that in my constituency in the 60s a new town was built and there was no cemetery provision. The council have, in the last few years, given permission for planning permission for a cemetery and crematorium, but at the other side of the borough, nothing's happening. We're making no progress. There's no danger of the council forcing the issue, and yet my constituents are having to pay what amounts to a death tax by being buried or cremated in other areas. And we really need, and does the honourable gentleman agree, that we really need councils to act with compassion towards their residents, the people who are paying the council tax, and they oughtn't to be forced to be buried out or cremated out of the area at a huge cost to them. And there are religious connotations, and these the local Catholic priests are really anxious that Skelmersdale has its own cemetery. Sorry, I shouldn't just say Catholic priests, but the local priesthood, all denominations need burial space.
Member for West Lancashire, I absolutely agree with everything she said, and should be delighted to know that the wonderful library briefing on this issue specifically has told me about the points that the honourable member is aware of, but I agree with what she said. But evidence is it's not just restricted to large metropolitan areas such as London. There's problems in rural locations, there's problems for example, with financing the purchase of new land for burial and securing appropriate land at a reasonable distance from the communities. And in 2007, I know the Honourable Lady raised the issue in the House, and obviously it hasn't been solved. In 2011, the Church of Wales claimed that 2/3 of its 1,000 burial grounds would be full in 10 years, and the Church was short of funds to maintain graves. It added that it could not afford to extend or open new churchyards, so it is quite clear that this is a major issue. Now, the government has, over the past decade, begun to recognise that this is a problem, beginning with, in 2001, Environment, Transport and Regional Affairs Committee's inquiries into cemeteries. And there was a Home Office report in 2004. But I do think there has been some inactivity in terms of responding positively to the problems. There are knock-on effects in terms of cost of the population. I think foremost among these is narrowing affordable burial options. There is no burial space available in a local cemetery often. The family may be forced to choose a burial plot that is some distance away from the deceased where they actually live. And that can be very emotionally distressing and geographically challenging, with the deceased losing any links to the local area and the family having to travel some distance to visit the grave. There is an economic impact in terms of costs on local authorities, and I've already mentioned issues concerning the Muslim and Jewish community. I think the House should consider the impact of historic cemeteries. We have many of them in the United Kingdom. Many of these historic cemeteries subsequently have become full, often becoming neglected, even though they may well contain wonderful buildings, artefacts and landscapes of great importance and heritage. Currently, it is estimated that there are approximately 3,500 pre-1940 historic cemeteries in the UK, all of which can be at risk because of lack of burial space. For example, in the London Borough of Newham, where I was born, 60% of public open space is made up of cemetery land. In the London Borough of Newham, where the Olympics stage, 60% of the land is actually made up, given over to cemeteries. Now, if I can end with the solutions. It has been suggested the reuse of graves. This is a very, very controversial suggestion. But some people favour it. It's not a new idea, it's been under consideration for some time. I can remember in 1994 there being a bit of around the house about it. It's called the lift and deeper method, where graves are excavated to their deepest depths, with all remains being placed in a casket and reinterred at the bottom of the grave. The research team involved interviewed 1,603 members of the public. The majority thought that it was a good idea, but I have my own personal views on it. The reuse of graves older than 75 years is allowed in London under the Local Authorities Act of 2007. But I say again, it is a controversial activity. I believe Southwark Council has unveiled plans recently to tackle lack of burial space within the borough by reusing graves. If approved, such action would free up 1,600 burial plots by 2015 and more than 5,000 by 2028. But now to come to what my honourable friend intervened at the start of this debate on, Italian-style mausoleums. I believe that this is a possible solution. I've been to see them in America and other parts, and I think done well, it's both respectful and very, very tasteful. It is particularly prominent in southern European countries, obviously Italy. These mausoleums allow for a maximum number of entombments in a minimum amount of space. Not only is it using space effectively within burial grounds, but it also provides the opportunity to be interned alongside loved ones. They can be in a variety of shapes, sizes, materials used, but I think it is a possible solution, and I think we should learn from best practice in Northern Ireland. And green burials are a solution as well. We could consider the environmental benefit, the natural process, which frees up space more quickly. There is no bulky headstone. Instead, the burial register can be anything from a shrub to a tree, an electronic chip, which would help keep space to an absolute minimum. Coffins are made of biodegradable cardboard or paper mache, thus freeing up space under the ground at a faster rate than would otherwise be the case. Finally, the graveyard, when full, can then be turned into a nature reserve or indeed a picnic site, and many people have no problem with that. Wouldn't be my choice, but I would probably be in a tiny minority. The first green burial site was opened up in Carlisle in 1993, and there are now more than 200 across the United Kingdom. A further benefit to this method is the low cost, with cardboard coffins costing as little as £60. So in conclusion, I would like to ask my honourable friend the Minister what the government's views are about adopting any of these measures that I've mentioned today. New methods such as these are also becoming more widespread, and I wonder whether the government's position on these has altered from when we had a debate on this some years ago. I am aware that, as ever, the situation is being kept under review. Everything seems to be under review, but it would be nice if, rather than reviewing things, we could then actually have a little bit of activity, because I think if we do nothing, people are going to be left with less choice, further increasing the case of having cremation as the solution that is offered to us all. Those who still opt for a burial, either out of choice or due to religious conviction, are likely to be faced with considerable costs and the likelihood that burials will occur outside the local area. I think we should buck our cultural trend and face up to the treatment of death. Everyone, other than those who tragically commit suicide, none of us know when we're going to die, but I do think the way we say goodbye to a loved one should be treated with the greatest dignity possible.